If you're watching this video, it's because you're tired of being walked over, dismissed, or treated like you don't matter. You're sick of people interrupting you, ignoring your boundaries, and acting like your time and opinions have no value. You've probably tried being nicer, more accommodating, more understanding, and it only made things worse. People saw your kindness as weakness and pushed even harder. Well, I'm about to show you exactly why that approach fails, and more importantly, what actually works. Over the next 40 minutes, I'm going to give you the 5 specific tactics used by the most powerful and respected man in human history, Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, to ensure that no one, and I mean no one, ever dared to disrespect him. But here's what's crucial to understand. Marcus Aurelius wasn't respected because people feared his power. He was respected because he had mastered the psychology of human behavior in a way that made disrespecting him literally unthinkable. His own enemies respected him. His political rivals respected him. Even the barbarian tribes that Rome was at war with respected him. This wasn't about fear. It was about presence, authority, and unshakable inner strength. And here's the best part. These tactics work just as effectively today as they did 2,000 years ago, because human psychology hasn't changed. The same principles that commanded respect in the Roman Senate will command respect in your relationship, and every interaction you. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to implement these 5 tactics. You'll understand why most men fail to command respect, and you'll have a clear step-by-step plan to ensure it never happens to you again. But fair warning, this isn't about manipulation or trick. This is about fundamental transformation of how you show up in the world. Let me tell you exactly who Marcus Aurelius was, and why his approach to respect is the gold standard that every man should study. Marcus Aurelius ruled the Roman Empire from 161 to 180 AD, during what historians call the height of Roman power. But he didn't inherit a peaceful kingdom. He took control during one of the most challenging periods in Roman history, facing plague, war, betrayal, and constant threats to his authority. Picture this: you're 28 years old, and suddenly you're responsible for governing 60 million people across 3 continents. Every decision you make affects the lives of millions. You have senators plotting against you, generals questioning your military strategy, and barbarian tribes testing your borders. One wrong move could mean civil war, invasion, or the collapse of civilization itself. Most men would crack under this pressure. Most would become paranoid tyrants, surrounding themselves with yes men and ruling through fear. Marcus did the opposite. He developed a system of thinking and behaving that made him so respected that even his enemies admired him. Here's what makes his approach revolutionary. Marcus Aurelius wrote down his thoughts in what we now call meditation, basically his private journal where he worked out his philosophy of leadership and respect. These weren't public speeches or political propaganda. These were his honest reflections on how to maintain authority and command respect while staying true to his principle. And what's remarkable is that 2,000 years later, these principles are more relevant than ever. In our modern world of social media, office politics, and constant social interaction, the men who command real respect are using the same fundamental approaches that Marcus perfected. But here's what most people don't realize about Marcus Aurelius. He wasn't naturally charismatic or intimidating. Historical accounts describe him as somewhat reserved, philosophical, and more interested in books than battle. Yet, he commanded absolute respect from warriors, politicians, and intellectuals alike. This means his methods weren't about natural talent or personality. They were about learnable systems and mindsets. The Roman historian Cassius Dio wrote that even Marcus's enemies acknowledged his wisdom and integrity. When he died, barbarian tribes that had been at war with Rome for years sent envoys to pay their respects. Think about people who had been trying to destroy his empire still respected him personally. This is the level of respect we're talking about. Not grudging compliance or fearful obedience, but genuine respect that transcends even conflict and disagreement. Now, before we dive into Marcus's tactics, we need to understand why most men today struggle so much with commanding respect. Because the strategies that work in our modern world are often the opposite of what feels natural or what we've been taught. Let me paint you a picture of what disrespect looks like in the modern world and see if any of this sounds familiar. You're in a meeting at work and you share an idea. Someone immediately jumps in with, "Well, actually," and proceeds to explain why your idea won't work, often misrepresenting what you actually said. The rest of the meeting continues as if your contribution never happened. You sit there feeling frustrated, maybe planning what you should have said, but the moment has passed. Or maybe it's this scenario. You're having dinner with friends, and you start telling a story about something that happened to you recently. Halfway through, someone interrupts with their own story, completely hijacking the conversation. Everyone turns their attention to them, and your story is forgotten. When you try to finish it later, someone says, "Oh, Didn't you already tell us this? Here's another common one. You set a boundary with someone. Maybe you tell your colleague that you can't take on extra projects because you're already overloaded. They respond with, "Come on, it'll just take a few minutes." Or, "You're the only one who knows how to do this properly." Before you know it, you're saying yes, and they walk away, knowing they can override your boundaries whenever they want. Or consider this workplace scenario. You send an email with a clear request or instruction. The response you get either ignores half of what you wrote or asks questions that were already answered in your original message. When you follow up, they act like you're being difficult for asking them to actually read and respond to what you wrote. These situations have one thing in common. People are testing your boundaries, your authority, and your willingness to stand up for yourself. And here's the brutal truth. Every time you don't respond appropriately, you're training them to disrespect you more. But here's where it gets even more insidious. Most men today have been conditioned to respond to disrespect in ways that actually invite more disrespect. We've been taught to be the bigger person, to choose our battles, to not make waves. We've been told that getting upset about these things makes us petty or insecure. So what do most men do? They internalize the disrespect. They tell themselves it's not a big deal. They rationalize it. He's just having a bad day. Or she didn't mean it that way. Or it's not worth the conflict. They convince themselves that being understanding and forgiving makes them mature. But here's what actually happens. When you consistently accept disrespectful treatment without consequence, you're not being mature. You're being trained. You're teaching people that your time, opinions, and boundaries are optional. You're showing them that they can treat you however they want without any real cost. And the worst part is that this becomes a downward spiral. The more you accept disrespect, the less people respect you. The less people respect you, the more they test your boundary. The more they test your boundaries, the more you feel like you have to prove yourself. And the more you try to prove yourself, the more desperate and needy you appear, which invites even more disrespect. This is why being nice doesn't work. This is why trying to earn respect through accommodation and people-pleasing backfires. This is why men who bend over backwards to be liked often end up being the least respected people in their social and professional circles. Marcus Aurelius understood something that modern men have forgotten. Respect isn't about being likable. Respect is about being respectable. And being respectable means having standards, boundaries, and the strength to maintain them regardless of how others react. Now, let me show you exactly how he did this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Speak only when your words are more powerful than your silence." This wasn't just philosophical advice. It was a strategic principle that saved his reign multiple times and earned him respect, even from his enemies. Let me tell you the story of how Marcus used silence to handle one of the most dangerous political challenges of his reign. In 175 AD, news reached Rome that Avidius Cassius, the governor of Syria and one of Marcus's most trusted generals, had declared himself emperor. Cassius controlled several legions and had significant support in the eastern province. This was the kind of betrayal that could destroy an empire. The Roman Senate immediately convened an emergency session. Senators were panicking, demanding immediate military action, calling for Cassius to be declared a public enemy. The room was chaos, everyone talking at once. Voices raised, competing to show their loyalty to Marcus by being the most out. Marcus entered the Senate chamber and took his seat. And then he did something extraordinary. Absolutely nothing. He sat in complete silence for several minutes, while the chaos continued around him. Not angry silence, not contemptuous silence, but calm, thoughtful silence. Gradually, the room began to quiet. Senators started to notice that their emperor wasn't speaking. The shouting died down to murmurs, then to whispers, then to complete silence. Everyone was watching Marcus, waiting for his response. After what felt like an eternity, Marcus spoke. His words were measured, calm, and devastating in their precision. Avidius Cassius believes he is acting in the best interests of Rome. We will give him the opportunity to reconsider this belief. That was it. No rage, no threats, no long speeches about loyalty and betrayal, just a simple statement that reframed the entire situation. Instead of treating Cassius as a traitor to be destroyed, Marcus treated him as a misguided ally to be corrected. This response was so unexpected and so controlled that it immediately shifted the entire dynamic. But here's the crucial part. Marcus's silence before speaking wasn't just dramatic effect, it was strategic calculation. In those minutes of silence, he was processing the situation, considering his option, and choosing the response that would serve his long-term authority rather than his immediate emotion. Most leaders would have felt compelled to match the energy in the room, to show appropriate outrage, to prove their strength through immediate action. Marcus understood that true strength lies in the ability to choose your response rather than react automatically. This principle of strategic silence is even more powerful in our modern world because most people have lost the ability to be comfortable with quiet moments. We live in a culture of constant noise, immediate responses, and the need to fill every silence with words. Here's how this looks in your your daily life. The workplace challenge. Your boss calls you into their office and starts criticizing a project you worked on. Your first instinct is to immediately defend yourself, explain your reasoning, and justify your choices. Instead, you stay silent. You listen to their complete criticism without interrupting. When they finish, you pause for 3 full seconds. This pause does several responding. First, it shows you're not reactive or defensive. Second, it forces them to sit with their words and consider whether they were fair or accurate. Third, it gives you time to formulate a thoughtful response rather than an emotional reaction. When you do respond, your words carry more weight because they were clearly chosen rather than blurted out. You might say something like, "I understand your concern. Let me think about the best way to address it." Then you pause again. Notice what you're not doing. You're not explaining, justifying, or defending. You're not trying to prove you were right. You're simply acknowledging their feedback and taking time to process it. This response is so unusual that it immediately commands respect. The social scenario. You're at a dinner party and someone makes a comment that's clearly intended to embarrass you or put you down. Maybe they say something like, "Oh, wasn't that the job you got fired from?" Or, "I thought you were trying to lose weight." Your instinct might be to laugh it off, make a joke back, or quickly change the subject. Instead, you stay silent. You look at them calmly for a moment, then you look around the table at the other guests, then back to them. After a few seconds, you simply say, "Interesting," and then continue eating. This response is devastating because it makes their comment hang in the air. Everyone at the table becomes uncomfortable with what they said, not with your response. Your silence makes their rudeness obvious to everyone present, while your calm demeanor shows you're unaffected by their attempt to diminish you. The personal relationship. Your partner is upset about something and starts listing all the things you do wrong. Instead of defending yourself or counterattacking with your own list of their faults, you stay silent. You listen completely. When they're finished, you wait a moment, then say, "I can see you're really frustrated. What would help you feel better right now?" This response is powerful because it doesn't escalate the conflict, but it also doesn't accept responsibility for things that aren't your fault. You're acknowledging their feeling without agreeing that their criticism is valid. Most importantly, you're maintaining your calm while they're emotional, which positions you as the stable force in the relationship. The boundary test. Someone asks you to do something that you don't want to do or that violates your boundary. Instead of immediately explaining why you can't do it, you pause. Then you simply say, "No, I won't be able to do that." Then silence. They'll likely push back. "Why not?" Or, "Come on, it'll only take a few minutes." You stay silent for a moment, then repeat, "I won't be able to do that." No explanation, no justification, no apology. This is powerful because most people expect you to explain your no, and when you don't, they're forced to accept face value. Your silence shows that your decision isn't up for negotiation or debate. But here's what's crucial to understand about strategic silence. It's not about being rude or antisocial. It's about breaking the automatic pattern of reactive communication that most people fall into. The 3 types of silence. Processing. Silence. When someone says something to you, especially something challenging or provocative, pause for 3 to 5 seconds before responding. This shows you're thinking, not reacting. Authority. Silence. After you make a statement or set a boundary, resist the urge to keep talking. Let your words stand on their own. Don't explain, justify, or soften them with additional commentary. Pressure. Silence. When someone is trying to pressure you into something, use silence to make them uncomfortable with their own pushiness. Often, they'll back down or reveal their true motivations. Implementation strategy. For the next 7 days, practice what I call the 3-second rule. Before responding to any request, challenge, or provocative comment, count to 3 in your head. 1. Mississippi. 2. Mississippi. 3. Mississippi. Then respond with the minimum words necessary. You'll be amazed at how this simple practice changes the entire dynamic of your interactions. People will start to perceive you as more confident, and more authoritative. Your words will carry more weight because people will know that when you speak, you've chosen your words carefully. But remember, Marcus's key insight: your silence must come from strength, not weakness. You're not staying quiet because you're afraid to speak up. You're staying quiet because you're choosing when and how to use your voice for maximum impact. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But this wasn't just philosophy for Marcus. It was a survival skill that he developed through some of the most emotionally challenging situations any leader has ever faced. Let me tell you about the moment that transformed Marcus from a philosophical student into an emperor who commanded respect through his unshakable emotional control. In 161 AD, Marcus's adoptive father, Emperor Antoninus Pius, died suddenly. Marcus was thrust into power during one of the most unstable periods in Roman history. The empire was facing threats on multiple frontiers. There was political unrest in the capital, and many questioned whether this philosophical young man had the strength to lead. Within months of taking power, Marcus faced his first major test. The Parthian Empire invaded Armenia, destroying Roman legions and threatening the entire eastern frontier. At the same time, tribes along the Danube frontier began raiding Roman territory. The empire was being attacked on two fronts, and panic was spreading through Rome. The Senate called an emergency session. Senators were demanding immediate action, questioning Marcus's competence, and some were even suggesting that perhaps a more experienced military leader should take control. The room was filled with fear, anger, and barely contained chaos. Here's where most leaders would have either panicked and made rash decisions, or gotten angry and tried to dominate the room through force of personality. Marcus did neither. He entered the Senate chamber and listened to every concern without interrupting. He didn't defend himself or make excuses. He didn't try to calm anyone down or tell them they were overreacting. He simply absorbed all the emotion in the room without letting it affect his own emotional state. When everyone had finished speaking, Marcus stood up and said, "I understand your concerns, and they are valid. Rome faces serious challenges. We will address each of them systematically with the gravity they deserve, but we will not allow fear to make our decisions for us." Then he outlined his strategy. He would send his best general, Lucius Verus, to handle the Parthian threat, while he remained in Rome to manage the northern frontier and maintain stability in the capital. He explained each decision calmly, logically, and with complete confidence. But here's what was remarkable. Marcus wasn't actually feeling calm. His private writings from this period show he was deeply worried about the future of the empire and questioning his own abilities. But he understood something crucial. His emotional state would become the emotional state of everyone around him. As emperor, he was the emotional thermostat for the entire empire. If he panicked, everyone would panic. If he showed uncertainty, uncertainty would spread. If he reacted with anger, anger would dominate the decision-making process. So Marcus made a conscious choice to control his emotional expression, not to suppress his emotions, but to express them strategically for the good of the empire. This decision saved Rome and established Marcus as one of the most respected leaders in history. Now here's how you apply this same principle in your modern life. The workplace power play. Imagine you're in a meeting and a colleague publicly challenges your competence in front of your boss and other team members. They say something like, "I'm not sure John's approach is going to work. He doesn't seem to understand the complexity of this project." Your first instinct might be to get defensive, to prove your competence by listing your qualification, or to counterattack by pointing out their own mistake. All of these responses would actually diminish your authority because they show you're reactive and easily rattled. Instead, you pause for a moment, make eye contact with the person who challenged you, and say calmly, "I appreciate your concern. What specific aspects worry you?" Then you stay silent and wait for their response. Notice what you've done. You've acknowledged their challenge without accepting it as valid. You've put the burden on them to be specific rather than making vague criticism. Most importantly, you've shown that their attempt to rattle you has failed completely. If they can't provide specific concerns, they look foolish. If they can provide specific concerns, you can address them professionally. Either way, you maintain your authority because you didn't let their emotional manipulation affect your emotional state. The personal relationship test. Your partner comes home angry about their day and starts taking it out on you. They're being unreasonable, making accusations, and clearly trying to start a fight. This is one of the most challenging situations to handle with emotional control, because it's personal and you're dealing with someone you care about. Your instinct might be to defend yourself, point out that you're not the cause of their bad day, or match their angry energy. Instead, you stay calm and say, "I can see you've had a really difficult day. I'm not going to engage in an argument right now, but I'm here when you're ready to talk about what's actually bothering you." Then, you remove yourself from the situation, not dramatically, but calmly. You might go for a walk, work on a project, or simply go to another room. You're not running away from the conflict. You're refusing to participate in unproductive emotional chaos. This response is powerful because it shows you care about without accepting responsibility for managing their emotions. You're not trying to fix their mood or convince them they're being unreasonable. You're simply maintaining your own emotional stability while offering support when they're ready to receive. The social manipulation attempt. You're out with friends and someone starts making jokes at your expense, clearly trying to get a reaction and establish dominance in the group. They might say something like, "Oh, here comes Mr. Perfect," or make comments about your job, your appearance, or your life choices. Your instinct might be to laugh along to show you're a good sport, or to make jokes back to defend yourself. Both of these responses actually reinforce their behavior because they show it's affecting you. Instead, you respond with controlled neutrality. You don't laugh, you don't get angry, you don't defend yourself. You simply look at them for a moment and then continue the conversation as if they hadn't spoken. If they escalate, you might say calmly, "That's an interesting perspective," and then turn to someone else in the group. This response is devastating to their attempt at dominance because it shows their behavior has no effect on you. It also makes their rudeness obvious to everyone else in the group without you having to point it out explicitly. The professional pressure situation. Your boss is trying to pressure you into working overtime again, even though you've already put in extra hours this week. They're using guilt, urgency, and veiled threats to try to manipulate you into saying yes. Your emotional response might be frustration, resentment, or anxiety about potential consequences, but you control your expression of these emotions. You don't show irritation, you don't explain your personal circumstances, and you don't get defensive about your work ethic. Instead, you say calmly, "I understand this is important. I won't be able to stay late today, but I can prioritize this first thing tomorrow morning." Then, you stay silent and wait for their response. If they continue to pressure you, you repeat your boundary without elaboration. "I won't be able to stay late today." Your calm consistency makes it clear that this isn't a negotiation. It's a professional boundary. The 3 levels of emotional control. Reactive level. You respond immediately based on how you feel. This gives others control over your emotional state and diminishes your authority. Suppressive level. You try to hide or deny your emotions. This creates internal tension and often leads to explosive outbursts later. Strategic level. You acknowledge your emotions internally, but choose how to express them for maximum effectiveness. This is what Marcus mastered, the Marcus Aurelius emotional reset technique. When you find yourself in an emotionally charged situation, use this 3-step process. Pause and breathe. Take a slow, deep breath before responding. This gives you time to move from reactive to strategic thinking. Ask the authority question. How would someone I respect handle this situation? This helps you choose your response based on who you want to be, not how you currently feel. Respond from choice, not emotion. Speak and act based on your values and long-term goals, not your immediate emotional reaction. Implementation challenge. For the next 2 weeks, practice becoming the emotional thermostat in every interaction. When someone brings drama, chaos, or negative energy into your space, consciously choose to maintain your emotional equilibrium rather than matching their energy. Keep a simple log of these situations. What happened? What was your emotional reaction internally? How did you choose to respond? What was the result? You'll quickly discover that when you stop being emotionally reactive, people start treating you with significantly more respect. They'll begin to see you as the stable, reliable force in their lives, rather than someone they can manipulate through emotional manipulation. Remember Marcus's core insight. You can't control what happens to you, but you can always control how you respond. And your response, not the initial event, determines whether you gain or lose respect in any situation. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect." This principle led him to master one of the most powerful tools for commanding respect, the strategic withdrawal. Most men today are afraid to walk away. They've been conditioned to think that persistence is always virtuous, that quitting is failure, and that a real man fights for what he wants no matter what. Marcus understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is remove your energy, attention, and presence from situations where you're not being valued. Let me tell you about one of the most brilliant examples of strategic withdrawal in history. In 178 AD, Marcus was engaged in complex negotiations with the Marcomanni, a powerful Germanic tribe that had been raiding Roman territories along the Danube frontier. These negotiations were crucial. A successful agreement could bring peace to the region, while failure could mean years of costly warfare. The Marcomanni leaders, however, were deliberately disrespectful during the negotiations. They would arrive late to meetings, interrupt Roman speakers, make unreasonable demands, and generally conduct themselves as if they held all the power. They were testing Marcus, trying to see if they could intimidate the philosopher emperor into making concessions. Most leaders in this situation would have either capitulated to keep the peace or responded with military threats to force compliance. Marcus did something entirely different. During one particularly disrespectful session where the Marcomanni leaders were openly mocking Roman proposals, Marcus quietly stood up in the middle of their speech. He didn't say a word. He simply gathered his papers, nodded to his advisors, and walked out of the tent. His entire delegation followed him in silence. The Marcomanni leaders were stunned. They had expected anger, threats, or desperate attempts to continue the negotiation. They hadn't expected calm, dignified withdrawal. Marcus didn't storm back to Rome. He didn't issue ultimatums. He simply set up his camp and waited. For 3 days, he conducted normal business, reviewing troop reports, meeting with other tribal delegations, administering the provinces. He acted as if the Marcomanni negotiation had never happened. On the fourth day, Marcomanni envoys appeared at his camp, asking to resume negotiation. But now the dynamic had completely changed. They approached with proper diplomatic protocol, showed appropriate respect, and came prepared to make serious offers rather than test boundaries. Marcus had demonstrated something crucial. He didn't need the negotiation more than they did. By walking away, he had shown that his time and respect were not negotiable, and that disrespectful treatment would result in the loss of access to him entirely. The negotiation resumed and concluded successfully, but on terms that reflected Marcus's position of strength. The Marcomanni had learned that respect wasn't optional. It was the price of entry to any interaction with him. This is the power of strategic withdrawal. It demonstrates value by removing it. Understanding strategic withdrawal versus running away. Strategic withdrawal isn't about being avoidant or conflict phobic. It's about making a conscious choice to remove yourself from situations where your standards aren't being met. The key differences are running away, emotional, reactive, permanent strategic withdrawal, calm, calculated, conditional. When you run away, you're escaping something. When you strategically withdraw, you're establishing standards. Modern applications. The chronic interrupter. You have a colleague who consistently interrupts you in meetings. You've tried speaking louder. You've tried finishing your sentences despite the interruption. You've tried addressing it privately. Nothing works. Instead of continuing to fight for airtime, you employ strategic withdrawal. The next time they interrupt you, you pause mid-sentence, close your laptop or notebook, and say calmly, "I'll send my thoughts in an email since it's difficult to discuss them here." Then you sit back and don't participate further in that discussion. You're not storming out dramatic. You're simply removing your contributions from a forum where they're not being respected. This sends a clear message. If people want your input, they need to create space for it to be heard. The boundary violator. You have a friend who consistently shows up late, cancels at the last minute, or changes plans without consideration for your time. You've talked to them about it, but nothing changes. Strategic withdrawal looks like this. You stop making open-ended plans. When they suggest getting together, you say, "I'd love to see you. I'm free Saturday from 2 to 4 p.m. for coffee at specific location. Let me know by Friday if that works for you." If they show up late, or try to change the plans last minute, you're not available for the changes. You stick to the original plan, or you make other arrangements. You don't get angry or lecture them. You simply stop accommodating their disorganization. The energy vampire. You know someone who consistently brings drama, negativity, or chaos into every interaction. They always have a crisis, always need emotional support, but never reciprocate or show appreciation for your energy. Strategic withdrawal means gradually reducing your availability for these interactions. When they call with their latest crisis, you might say, "I'm sorry you're dealing with that. I'm not in a position to help right, but I hope it works out." Then you don't elaborate or justify your unavailability. You're not cutting them off cruelly. You're simply protecting your energy by not volunteering it for one-sided relationship. The professional disrespecter. Your boss consistently takes credit for your idea, gives you assignments outside your job description without additional compensation, or speaks to you disrespectfully in front of others. Strategic withdrawal in a professional context requires more finesse, but it's still powerful. You might start documenting your ideas in emails before meetings. Following up on our discussion, here are my thoughts on the new marketing strategy. This creates a paper trail that makes it harder for them to claim credit. You might also start responding to unreasonable requests with professional boundaries. I'd be happy to take on the additional project. Given my current workload, I can either prioritize this and delay project X, or I can start this after I complete my current assignments. Which would you prefer? You're not being confrontational. You're simply making the consequences of their requests visible and giving them the responsibility to prioritize appropriate. The social media troll. Someone on social media is consistently argumentative, posting provocative comments on your content, or trying to draw you into unproductive debates. Strategic withdrawal is simple. Stop engaging. Don't argue. Don't defend. Don't try to have the last word. You might delete their comments without response, or simply ignore them entirely. If they escalate, you block them without explanation. This is powerful because trolls feed on engagement. When you remove that source of energy, they typically move on to easier targets. The 3 phases of strategic withdrawal. Phase 1, clear communication. Before withdrawing, make sure your expectations have been clearly communicated. You can't withdraw strategically from standards that were never established. Phase 2, consistent boundaries. When your standards aren't met, implement consistent consequences. Don't negotiate, explain, or make exceptions. Simply follow through on what you said would happen. Phase 3, calm removal. Remove your energy, attention, or presence from situations where your standards continue to be violated. Do this calmly and without drama. Implementation strategy. Identify 3 situations in your current life where you consistently accept disrespectful treatment. One professional situation, one personal relationship, one social, casual interaction. For each situation, define exactly what respectful treatment would look. Then plan your strategic withdrawal response for the next time your standards aren't met. Practice the language you'll use. I'm going to step away from this conversation, or I'll need to end this call now, or I'm not available for this kind of interaction. The key is to make your withdrawal feel inevitable rather than punitive. You're not trying to hurt anyone, you're simply protecting your own standards and energy. Common mistakes to avoid: threatening withdrawal. Don't warn people that you'll walk away. Just do it when the time comes. Explaining your withdrawal. Don't justify or elaborate on why you're leaving. Keep it simple and final. Emotional withdrawal. Don't withdraw in anger or frustration. Withdraw from a place of calm strength. Temporary withdrawal. Don't return to the same situation, hoping things will be different, unless the other person has explicitly acknowledged the issue and committed to change. Remember Marcus's insight: your presence is a gift, not a given right. When people treat that gift carelessly, the natural consequence is that they lose access to it. This isn't punishment, it's protection of your own value and energy. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy," but he also understood that respect without the ability to enforce consequences is merely wishful thinking. As emperor, he had to demonstrate that crossing him came with real costs. But he did this in a way that actually increased respect, rather than breeding resentment. This is what I call consequence authority, the ability to enforce boundaries and standards in a way that maintains your dignity, while clearly demonstrating that disrespecting you has real costs. Let me tell you the story of how Marcus handled what could have been the end of his reign, and how his approach to consequences actually strengthened his position. When Avidius Cassius declared himself emperor in 175 AD, it wasn't just political ambition. Cassius genuinely believed that Marcus was too philosophical, too soft to lead Rome effectively. He had convinced himself and his supporters that the empire needed a stronger, more traditional military leader. Cassius controlled Syria, Egypt, and several other eastern provinces. He had the loyalty of powerful legions and the support of wealthy provincial governors. This was a serious threat that required serious consequences. But here's where Marcus demonstrated his genius. Instead of immediately declaring Cassius a traitor and sending legions to destroy him, Marcus crafted a response that was both merciful and devastating. He issued a public decree stating that Cassius would be granted full amnesty if he surrendered within 30 days. However, anyone who continued to support him after that deadline would be treated as an enemy of Rome and face the full consequences of treason. This single decree accomplished multiple objectives simultaneously. First, it showed Marcus's strength and confidence. A weak emperor would have either panicked or tried to crush the rebellion immediately. Marcus's calm response demonstrated that he didn't see Cassius as a real threat to his authority. Second, it demonstrated mercy and wisdom. Rather than simply destroying a former ally, Marcus offered a path to redemption. This showed the empire that he was a leader who preferred justice to revenge. Third, and most importantly, created a clear consequence structure, forced everyone to choose side. Cassius's supporters now had to decide whether they were committed enough to face the consequences of continued rebellion. The result was brilliant. Cassius's own officers, realizing they were on the wrong side of someone who had both the power and the wisdom to use it effectively, killed Cassius and brought his head to Marcus. They chose to align themselves with strength rather than risk the consequences of continued defiance. Marcus had enforced the ultimate consequence without appearing vindictive or cruel. He had demonstrated absolute authority while maintaining his reputation for justice and wisdom. Modern consequence authority. In your modern life, consequence authority means establishing clear standards and consistently enforcing them in ways that protect your interests without making you appear petty or vindictive. The workplace boundary. Violator. Your colleague consistently dumps their urgent projects on you at the last minute, expecting you to stay late or sacrifice your own work to help them with their poor planning. Most people either say yes and breed resentment, or say no with elaborate explanation, which invites negotiation. Consequence authority looks different. The first time it happens, you help them but establish a boundary. I can help you with this today, but going forward, I'll need at least 24 hours notice for projects like this. The second time they come to you with an urgent request without proper notice, you implement the consequence. I understand this is urgent for you. I'm not available to help with same-day requests. I can look at this tomorrow afternoon if that works with your timeline. Notice what you're not doing. You're not explaining why you can't help. You're not apologizing for having boundaries, and you're not getting emotional about their poor planning. You're simply enforcing the standard you previously established. If they try to guilt you, but this is really important, or I thought I could count on you. You stay calm and consistent. I'm sure it is important. I can help tomorrow afternoon. The relationship disrespect pattern. Your partner consistently dismisses your concerns, interrupts you when you're trying to communicate something important, or makes decisions that affect you without consulting you. Consequence authority in a relationship requires more nuance because the goal is improvement, not punishment, but consequences are still necessary. First, you establish clear communication standards. When I'm sharing something important with you, I need you to listen without interrupting. If you disagree, I'd like you to wait until I'm finished and then share your perspective. If they continue interrupt, you implement a consequence. You stop sharing important things with them in the moment. When they interrupt, you say calmly, I'm going to continue this conversation later when we can both focus on listening to each other. Then you follow through. You don't continue the conversation. You don't try to finish your point despite their interruptions. You simply remove the opportunity for them to practice disrespectful communication patterns. The social disrespect situation. Someone in your social circle consistently makes jokes at your expense, tries to embarrass you in front of others, or treats social gatherings as opportunities to establish dominance over you. Consequence authority means making their behavior costly for them rather than for you. When they make a joke at your expense, you don't laugh along or make a joke back. You look at them for a moment and say, that's an interesting choice. Then turn your attention to someone else in the group. If they escalate, oh, come on, can't you take a joke? You respond with calm clarity. I can take jokes. I don't participate in conversations designed to make people uncomfortable. The consequence is that their behavior becomes obviously inappropriate to everyone present. They either have to acknowledge they were being inappropriate or continue behaving badly in front of witnesses. The professional credit stealer. Your boss or colleague consistently takes credit for your ideas, presents your work as their own, or fails to acknowledge your contributions in meetings or presentations. Consequence authority requires creating evidence and accountability systems. Start documenting your ideas in writing before sharing them verbally. Following up on our discussion, here are my thoughts on improving customer retention. Send these emails to relevant stakeholders, not just the credit stealer. When they present your ideas without attribution, you don't confront them directly in the moment. Instead, you follow up with an email. I'm glad you liked my suggestion about improving customer retention. If you need more details about implementation, I'm happy to discuss further. You're not accusing them of stealing credit. You're simply making it clear to everyone involved that the idea originated with you. The 3 levels of consequences. Level 1, natural consequences. These happen automatically when someone disrespects your boundary. You don't create, you simply allow them to occur. Example, if someone is consistently late to meetings with you, the natural consequence is that the meeting time gets shorter. You don't extend the meeting to accommodate their lateness. Level 2, logical consequences. These are consequences that logically flow from the disrespectful behavior. Example, if someone consistently interrupts you, the logical consequence is that you stop having detailed conversations with them. You share less information and keep interactions brief and professional. Level 3, imposed consequences. These are consequences that you actively create and enforce. Example, if someone violates a clear agreement, you might impose a waiting period before making new agreements with them. Implementation guidelines. Make consequences proportional. The response should match the level of disrespect. Don't use nuclear options for minor infractions. Make consequences consistent. Apply the same standards to everyone. Don't make exceptions because you like someone or fear their reaction. Make consequences educational. The goal is to teach better behavior, not to punish for punishment's sake. Make consequences clear. People should understand the connection between their behavior and the consequences they experience. Your action plan. This week, identify one person who consistently disrespects your boundaries without facing any consequences. Design a consequence system that is proportional to their behavior, completely under your control, to implement focused on protecting your interests rather than punishing, sustainable for you to maintain long term. Then implement it the very next time they cross your boundary. Don't warn them, don't explain it, don't negotiate about it. Simply follow through with calm consistency. Remember Marcus's key insight: consequences aren't about revenge or punishment. They're about creating a reality where respecting you is easier and more beneficial than disrespecting you. When you master this principle, people will respect your boundaries, not because they fear you, but because they understand that your standards are real and non-negotiable. Marcus Aurelius wrote what might be his most profound insight about commanding respect: how much trouble he avoids, who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does. This wasn't about being indifferent to others. It was about understanding that true, unshakable respect comes from an internal foundation that doesn't require external validation to remain strong. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive aspect of commanding respect. The less you need others' approval, the more respect you naturally command. Marcus discovered this principle through one of the most challenging periods any leader has ever faced. During the Antonine Plague, which devastated the Roman Empire from 165 to 180 AD, Marcus faced criticism that would have destroyed most leaders. The plague killed millions of people. Some estimates suggest it wiped out 1/3 of the population in affected areas. People were looking for someone to blame, and the emperor was the obvious target. Political opponents claimed the plague was divine punishment for Marcus's philosophical approach to leadership. Citizens questioned whether a philosopher could handle a crisis of this magnitude. Even some of his closest advisors suggested he should abandon his Stoic practices and appease the gods through traditional Roman religious ceremonies. The pressure to change, to prove himself, to seek validation through dramatic gestures was enormous. Most leaders would have either capitulated to popular opinion or lashed out at critics to defend their reputation. Marcus did neither. Instead, he demonstrated what true internal validation looks like under extreme pressure. He continued his philosophical studies and meditation practices. He personally visited affected areas, using his own wealth to fund relief efforts. He maintained his routine of writing in his journal each morning. He made decisions based on what he believed was right, not on what would make him popular or silence his critic. Most remarkably, he never defended himself publicly or tried to prove his competence to his critic. He simply continued to act according to his principles, regardless of whether others approved or understood. The result was extraordinary. His quiet consistency during the crisis actually increased the respect people had for him. They saw that his leadership wasn't dependent on their approval, that his decisions came from internal conviction rather than external pressure. This made him seem more trustworthy, not less. By the end of the plague, Marcus had not only preserved his authority, but had actually strengthened. People respected him not because he had successfully managed an impossible situation, but because he had remained true to himself, even when the entire empire was questioning his approach. This is the power of internal validation. When your sense of worth and confidence doesn't depend on others' opinions, people naturally respect that independence. Understanding internal versus external validation. External validation. Your self-worth depends on others' approval, praise, or recognition. You change your behavior to gain acceptance or avoid criticism. Internal validation. Your self-worth comes from your own assessment of whether you're living according to your values and standards. Others' opinions are information to consider, not verdicts to accept. Most men today are trapped in external validation without realizing. They change their opinions based on what others want to hear, seek approval before making decisions, feel anxious when criticized, even by people they don't respect, measure their worth by social media likes, professional recognition, or relationship status. Avoid taking risks because they fear others' judgment. Modern applications of internal validation. The workplace opinion test. You propose a new approach to a project in a meeting. A colleague immediately shoots it down, saying it won't work, and that you don't understand the complexity of the situation. Everyone in the room is watching to see how you'll respond. External validation response. You immediately defend your idea, provide extensive justification, or modify your proposal to gain their approval. Internal validation response. You say calmly, "I think this approach has merit. If you have specific concerns, I'm happy to address them, but I'm confident in the framework." Then you move forward with your original plan unless they provide compelling reasons to change it. The difference is that you're not seeking their approval to feel confident in your idea. You've evaluated it based on your own standards and expertise, and their criticism doesn't automatically make you doubt yourself. The social status challenge. You're at a networking event where everyone seems more successful, better connected, or more impressive than you. Someone asks what you do, and you can feel them evaluating whether you're worth their time based on your answer. External validation response. You exaggerate your accomplishments, name drop to seem more impressive, or feel insecure about your achievements compared to others in the room. Internal validation response. You describe what you do accurate and with genuine enthusiasm, regardless of how impressive it sounds to them. You're interested in making genuine connections, not improving your worth to strangers. The relationship pressure situation. Your partner criticizes something about you, your career progress, your social skills, your appearance, or your lifestyle choices. They seem disappointed and suggest you need to change to meet their expectation. External validation response. You immediately try to change to gain their approval, feel guilty about not meeting their standards, or become defensive about your choices. Internal validation response. You listen to their feedback objectively. If it's valid and aligns with your own goals, you consider making changes. If it's not, You respond with something like, "I understand that's how you see it. I'm comfortable with my choice on this." The professional recognition scenario. A colleague gets promoted to a position you wanted, or receives recognition for work that you feel your own contributions made possible. You're feeling overlooked and undervalued. External validation response. You either become bitter and resentful, or you desperately try to prove your worth by working harder, taking on more projects, or seeking validation from your boss. Internal validation response. You acknowledge the disappointment internally, then refocus on whether you're growing in ways that matter to you. You might say, "Congratulations, that's a great opportunity for you," and mean it genuinely, because their success doesn't diminish your worth. Building internal validation systems. 1. Define your own success metrics. Instead of measuring your worth by external achievements, develop internal metrics based on your values. Am I growing as a person? Am I contributing meaningfully to others' lives? Am I living according to my principles? Am I becoming the person I want to be? 2. Create a personal review process. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal every morning, reflecting on how well he was living up to his own standards. Develop a similar practice. Weekly review questions. What did I do this week that I'm proud of? Where did I compromise my values or standards? What did I learn about myself? How did I handle challenges and setbacks? 3. Separate feedback from validation. Learn to receive others' opinions as information rather than verdicts. That's an interesting perspective. I'll consider that feedback. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts. These responses acknowledge their input without accepting it as automatically true or important. Implementation strategy. Week 1. Awareness. Pay attention to how often you seek external validation. Notice when you change your opinion based on others' reactions, feel anxious about others' judgment, modify your behavior to gain approval, measure your worth by external achievements. Week 2. Experimentation. Practice making small decisions based solely on your own preferences. Choose what to wear based on what you like, not what others might think. Express opinions that reflect your genuine thoughts, not what you think others want to hear. Make social plans based on what you enjoy, not what seems impressive. Week 3. Implementation. Begin applying internal validation to bigger situations. Set goals based on your values, not others' expectation. Respond to criticism by evaluating its merit rather than its emotional impact. Make career and relationship decisions based on your authentic desires. The internal validation mantra. When you find yourself seeking external approval or feeling shaken by others' opinion, use Marcus's insight. I have my own standards. I live by my own values. Others' opinions are information, not instructions. Common misconception. Internal validation doesn't mean ignoring all feedback or criticism, being arrogant or dismissive of others, never caring what anyone thinks, avoiding all external recognition. It means filtering feedback through your own judgment, maintaining confidence that doesn't depend on others' approval, caring about others' opinions without being controlled by them, enjoying recognition without needing it for self-worth. Remember, Marcus's final insight. When you stop needing others' respect, you naturally begin commanding. People are drawn to those who have a strong sense of self because it's a rare and valuable quality in our validation-hungry world. Now that you understand all 5 tactics that Marcus Aurelius used to command unshakable respect, let me show you how they work together to create what Marcus called an unshakable mind, a presence that naturally commands respect because it cannot be manipulated, intimidated, or diminished by external circumstances. These tactics aren't meant to be used in isolation. They're designed to work together as a complete system for transforming how you show up in the world and how others respond to you. The synergy effect. When you master the discipline of silence, you stop giving others ammunition to use against you. When you control your emotional expression, you become the steady force that others rely on. When you use strategic withdrawal, you demonstrate that your time and energy have value. When you establish consequence authority, you show that disrespecting you comes with real costs. And when you operate from internal validation, you become independent of others' need to tear you down to build themselves up. Together, these create what I call natural authority, the kind of presence that makes people instinctively treat you with respect, not because they fear consequences, but because something about you communicates that you're not someone who accepts disrespectful treatment. Your 90-day transformation plan, days 1 to 30, foundation building focus on mastering the discipline of silence and controlled emotional expression. These are the foundation skills that make everything else possible. Practice the 3-second pause before responding to any challenging comment or request. Master the art of saying exactly what you mean without over-explaining or justifying. Work on becoming the emotional thermostat in your interaction rather than the thermometer. When others bring chaos or drama, practice maintaining your calm and letting your stability influence the situation rather than being influenced by. Days 31-60. Boundary implementation. Add strategic withdrawal and consequence authority to your toolkit. Start identifying situations where you consistently accept disrespectful treatment and develop specific plans for how you'll respond differently. Practice walking away from conversations where you're not being heard, from commitments that don't serve you, and from people who consistently violate your boundaries. Begin implementing natural consequences for disrespectful behavior. Make these consequences proportional, consistent, and focused on protecting your interests rather than punishing others. Days 61-90. Internal mastery. Focus on developing unshakable internal validation. This is the advanced level that makes everything else sustainable long-term. Create your own success metrics based on your values rather than external recognition. Develop a daily or weekly review process for assessing how well you're living according to your standards. Practice making decisions based on your authentic desires and values, rather than what you think will gain others' approval or avoid their criticism. The Marcus Aurelius Daily Practice. Every morning, before you interact with anyone else, spend 5 minutes reflecting on these questions. What kind of person do I want to be today? How will I respond if someone tests my boundaries? What are my non-negotiable standards for how I'll be treated? How will I maintain my calm if someone tries to provoke me? What decisions will I make based on my values rather than others' expectations? This morning practice does what Marcus's journal writing did for him. It sets your internal compass before you face the day's challenges. Measuring your progress. You'll know these tactics are working when people stop interrupting you in conversation, others ask your opinion, and actually listen to your response. You feel calm and centered, even in challenging social situations. People begin treating your time as valuable. You stop feeling the need to prove yourself or gain others' approval. Others start coming to you for advice and guidance. You feel confident setting boundaries. Without guilt or anxiety, people respond positively to your leadership and direction. The respect multiplier effect. Here's what most men don't realize. Respect is self-reinforcing. The more respect you command, the easier it becomes to command even more respect. When people see that others treat you with respect, they automatically adjust their own behavior to match that standard. This is why Marcus Aurelius became more respected over time rather than less. Each interaction where he demonstrated his unshakable character made the next interaction easier because people approached him with the expectation that he was someone who commanded respect. Your commitment, the principles I've shared with you today, worked for the Emperor of Rome facing betrayal, war, and plague. They'll work for you facing office politics, difficult relationships, and social challenges, but only if you commit to implementing them consistently. These aren't tricks or manipulation tactics. They're fundamental changes in how you think about yourself and how you show up in the world. That means they require practice, patience, and persistence. Choose one tactic to focus on this week. Master it completely before moving to the next one. Remember, Marcus Aurelius didn't become unshakable overnight. He developed these skills through years of practice and reflection. But here's the promise. If you commit to this path, if you dedicate yourself to developing the same inner strength that made Marcus Aurelius one of the most respected leaders in history, you will never again have to accept disrespectful treatment from anyone. You will become the kind of person who naturally commands respect, not through force or manipulation, but through the simple power of knowing your worth and refusing to accept anything less than treatment that reflects that worth. The Emperor of Rome showed you the way. The only question now is whether you'll have the courage to walk the path. Start today. Start with silence. Start with emotional control. Start with boundaries. Start with consequences. Start with internal validation. Start becoming the man you were always meant to be, unshakable, respected, and fully in control of your own life. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." The same is true of respect. Everything you need to command respect is already within you. These tactics simply show you how to access and express that natural authority. The transformation begins now,